I'm in the third installment of Coach Ron's Change Connections Trilogy, Part 3. This part is important. I've already told you so far about who I am as a coach. And then last time I shared some very introspective family dimensions, kind of gives an idea of where I come from. And yes, I'm no different than either of my parents. I am grateful for who they were, for what they learned in their lives, and I hope I can continue to learn important lessons. And I hope that I'm able to learn important lessons until I die. And so my parents taught me to never give up. You can always change. That is never too late. This installment, I would like to share with you the ministry side of me. The ministry side of me. Coach Ron, I'm the Ron that was created from who my parents were. They both have passed on now, but I'm also the ministry part, the ministry side of me, I will share with you today. So, as I begin to talk about this side, I was working in the government and I had just gotten 10 years in, and I had become assistant pastor at First Baptist Church of Highland Park. And I became, at the beginning of 1986, I became the full time assistant pastor of the First Baptist Church of Highland Park. I was the ripe age of 27 years old. And that was truly an exciting moment because I thought I'd never see the end of my good old government job. I thought I'd never see the end of it. But after 10 years, I'd just gotten one of those 10-year awards, whatever it was back then. And here I was now going to be on staff uh, at First Baptist Church of Highland Park in Landover, Maryland. And I ended up being there for 10 years. 10 years, if you've been listening to me tell my story, you will realize that there are a lot of things that I've said that were about 10 years. And so my first bout of being in full time ministry uh, lasted for 10 years before a change came. And as in any and everything, there's so much you have to learn, especially being 27 years old. I was the first full time staff pastor the church had ever had. The only pastor that was full time was the pastor. And so it was a privileged position to be in at that young age, to be called to be the assistant uh, pastor full time. And I remember I had a little office. I mean, truly, the little office was a little office. But you know what? I never complained about my little office. What I tried to do was get the most done out of that little office. So people will tease me now because when I finally got a new office, I got a huge office, a huge office. And so my first little office, we call that the box. So I was in the box for several of those 10 years. And I'm grateful because it's not the size or the magnitude of what you're in. I wanted to make sure wherever I was, in the box or out of the box, that I wanted to do good work. And I'm grateful that that happened over those 10 years. So, in having that position, when I first got there, I didn't see much like a pastor. I was more like a glorified um, manager, administrator, procurement person, in particular procurement. I led the process of getting a new sound system for the church, which at that point a time it cost a lot of money because you're talking about back in 1986. And so that was a huge step for the church to buy a new PA system. And so I led the whole process, got the contractor, and watched over the entire process. And then I did employee insurance. You see, I'm saying I didn't seem like a minister at all. I did employee insurance and was able to hook the church up on that side. And the big thing that I did was I led the process of the church getting its first computer. Now, if I could tell you, do you know that it was a job to get the church to consider getting its first computer? I mean, that was no easy task. There was a notebook I put together giving all of the evidence needed, all the research I did. I wish maybe somebody in the archives could find that proposal I did for the first church computer system. Anyway, it was crazy, but you know what? We got it. Of course, the church had many computers after that, but that was a significant moment for the church. And so I had three pretty big projects, and those worked out well. Yes, I was still preaching during the time and all of that, but I was kind of excited being involved in procurement, in managing over those processes. But you know what? As a new hotshot assistant pastor full time, I hit some snags because eventually, if you're doing anything, I don't care how successful you are, you're going to hit some snags. And so, one of the things I orchestrated over, and this shows you how long ago it was, I orchestrated over them getting a payphone in the church. Now, you first of all, somebody said, "What in the world is a payphone?" Well, whatever it is, if we were getting a payphone in the church because otherwise people would go into the offices and all and use the phone, and so we wanted to find a way where people could make calls and didn't have to do it from our office phones. And so we got with a contractor, one that was used by someone I knew, and after we put the money up, and the thing is, it was crazy. We put all the money up because we trusted the entity. Well, it didn't work out. The situation didn't go through. That was the first opportunity for me to have pie on my face. And there's a saying that says, when it rains, it pours. And so that happened. And then the pastor was on vacation, and so I was doing a memo about an ordination service that we're going to have for one of our ministers. And so I sent out the communication to churches in the area. Well, to say the least, the letter was not up to par. It left a lot to be desired. And I probably should have had somebody proof it, and I didn't. And there's a learning curve to everything in life, and truly there was a learning curve to that. So that was another situation. In fact, when the pastor got back, he had to do the letter all over again and write kind of like an apology to the people. So crash number 2. And then there was crash number 3. And so uh the pastor went out of town, and he left me in charge. Now, uh, I was probably about a year in, and as I said, I'd had a lot of success. So I went to the meeting and I let the board know. This was both the deacon board and the trustee board, and I let them know that I didn't want them to think of me not as the person in charge. It's crazy when I think about it now. It's just crazy. So I let them know that while the pastor was gone, that I was in charge. Well, let's just say this. When the pastor got back and when he and the board finished meeting, let me just say this. I was not in charge. In fact, there was a long time before I got in charge again. And, so I was like on a high horse by all of these great things that I was doing for the church. And then I hit an undercurrent. It's almost like being out in the ocean and you don't realize that you've drifted pretty far from the shore, and all of a sudden you realize there's no bottom. I've had that happen in the Atlantic Ocean, in Ocean City, and I didn't know. And I'm just so grateful that somehow I went under and swam as hard as I could. And believe me, at that point in time, in fact, that meeting that I was in, I got so upset, you know, when they told me what the new situation would be and that I wouldn't, be able to do this, that, and the other. Again, 27 years old, guys. Give me a break. I was 27 years old. Let me just tell you this. I walked out of the meeting. I mean, I just, let me just say this. Between the deacon and the trustee board, it had to be at least 40 people in there. Big shot, big time assistant pastor Ronald Crow. I walked out of the meeting in a huff. Ooh, could I just tell you this? It's so funny, but it wasn't funny then at all. It was not funny because when I walked out of the meeting, I was devastated. And I got home and in tears, I told my wife what had happened. What had happened, babe, is I can't do nothing no more. And my wife listened to my hard luck story and she said to me, "What is it that you can do?" I want you guys to hear me because if there was ever a moment of time where God was in the room, she said, "You're focused now on what you lost and what you can't do." She said, "What can you do?" And I said, "Well, they said that I can work with Christian education." And I said it where what the hell do I want to work with Christian education for? I mean, I'm just telling you. Let me just tell you something about my new identity as a podcaster. Can I just tell y'all this? I'm not faking nothing no more. I'm telling you how I really feel about the world and the whole thing. I'm not trying to be nobody. I'm just Coach Ron. So you're going to hear it from me like I want to say it. So she said, "Well, then do that and do that to the best of your ability." Now, I said to you that when I was managing over all of the procurement processes and making big expenditures and purchases for needed things in the church, it didn't seem so pastoral. But all of a sudden, I was now head of Christian education, and I focused all I had on being the best that I could be. I raised up a program in Christian education where I started to bring big seminars. Back then, churches, especially Black churches, had revivals. And our church had revivals, but we were able now to bring some big teaching events in. For 3 days, for 5 days, we'd have some of the best speakers around the country who came in to talk to us on different areas. It was so important then because we as a people, we were used to having people preach us up and down the aisle. And that was exciting and that was good. And that had its purpose. But we were now moving on a time where the teaching seminars were becoming huge and we were learning things, hearing things, beginning to practice things. Like I remember I went to a seminar to it's called Singles and Second Honeymoon Seminar, Willie Richardson. And the thing is that for the first time, I learned how to be married. You know, when you decide to get married, you tell people in the church, hey, you're going to marry this person and all. Nobody pulls you aside to say, hey, these are some things you need to check out, watch for, that you're going to go through. This is how you, I didn't have anyone to do, my wife and I didn't have that kind of discipleship, people to pull us aside and teach. And so that seminar, that teaching seminar, they taught about everything. They talked about how to work through issues and problems, how to romance one another, how the other things that you do besides romancing each other that impact the marriage, just all at things I had listen, after all those years of being in church, I had never heard about those things. So I was able to bring some big events to the church that set new standards. Another thing, discipleship. We were able to bring in what we call the NAV 27 discipleship. And these were 12-week sessions that we had. And there was like a couple of 2 or 3 levels of it. And we had a good amount of people in the church who were a part of that. And that kind of took in what later became cell groups. Well, before we had the cell groups, we had these discipleship groups, and we had them in people's homes, in the church. Man, the database that I put together for that, you know, because we had different teachers and they were at different places, and every teacher had a facilitator. And man, let me tell you, we worked that thing out, and the church was excited, ecstatic about it. Oh man, that worked out well. I hit it, Christian education, and I brought something called adult education. And I taught adult education courses for the Bible college in my area at my church. And we had so many people who were a part of that. They got grades, they had their stuff graded, and it was another good moment. So this is what I learned in that. First of all, if I hadn't listened to my wife, I can't even tell you where I would have been, but I would not have continued probably at the church. I would have been so embarrassed and so whatever. Let me just tell you this, by responding to what they considered to be a demotion of me and not making a big fuss, but going on and, as my wife said, do what you can do and do that well. Thank you, baby. You know, thank you very much. I love you and I appreciate you. So, because of that, I was able to go on. And what's significant is that when I let the church know, let my pastor know that I wanted to plant a church, that I felt led to plant a church, I got his full support. That would have never happened if I would have been too immature to take a demotion and not quit. It would have been so easy to quit at age 27 and full of yourself. It would have been so easy to just act stupid and allow them to fire me, and I would have been back in my good government job. I'd have been right back there again. When I planted my church, the conference I was under set up a plan for me to be supported for 3 years on a degrading basis each year. You may be less money each year because hopefully the church would be doing well enough and all so that we could do it that way. Well, Starting the first Sunday of that church, I brought in enough money that I never had to be supported on the system that the conference has set up. So I was able to go from being full-time on salary at Highland Park to full-time on salary at New Vision Church, the church I planted, all because of what God can do when you're not too prideful to learn a lesson.